to all you beautiful people out there. How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, where we talk everything National Football League, and season up, season it, doesn't matter, because it's football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to the show. Before we begin, I would like to ask, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy it, or if you know somebody else who might enjoy this. It really helps boost my exposure and get this channel out to more faces. So if you want to do that, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And if you haven't already, go subscribe me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. That link will be down in the description. On there, you will get exclusive content such as my weekly picks, as well as my draft content that I do in the off season. If you would like to support the channel that way, please go support me on Patreon, again at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of the things I just told you to do. Just the fact that you took the time out of your day to watch this means the absolute world to me. But with that being said, let's go on with the show. Quite a bit to talk about today. I was originally planning on doing a couple things. One, talking about the trade deadline that just ended yesterday, but also do my week mid-season report cards on each of the 32 teams. But a few things stop that plan, and I will not be doing the weekly reports, or not the weekly reports, the mid-season reports on the teams until next week for a couple of reasons. One, I did not expect the trade deadline yesterday to be as busy as it ended up being. And also, we got some pretty big news that just dropped this morning. Could be pretty significant news, actually. And what that news is, and I will start off the show by talking about this real quick. When you think of terrible NFL owners, what's the first thing that comes to mind? You'd probably think of someone like a Jimmy Haslam for the Cleveland Browns. You probably think of someone like a Stephen Ross for the Miami Dolphins. You probably think of, if you're an oldie, you probably think of a Hugh Culverhouse. But for most people, myself included, when you hear the name terrible NFL owner, the one name that instantly pops into your mind is Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder. He is the poster child of being a piece of shit owner. The poster child for it. I mean, there's pretty understandable of why you would think that, or why most people had that opinion of him. All the terrible, terrible things that have come out over the past, 3 or 4 years? Longer, actually. Not just his bizarre way of running the team, not just his straight up refusal to renovate FedEx Field to the point where it has not been touched since 1999 when he bought the team. So it's so bad to the point where the stadium is literally starting to fall apart in some areas. It's not just that. It's the workplace environment that he's created there. You know, we just saw in the Washington Post article that released, back in 2018, I want to say? 2018, maybe 2020. Of all the misconduct that has occurred in that building under Dan Snyder's leadership. It's just been this toxic environment of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. I think nearly 40 different women. I think around 35 to 40 different women in total that have come out publicly saying that they've had terrible work experiences there, getting harassed sexually constantly throughout their experience there. There's the incident with the cheerleaders of them being taken out to Costa Rica, taking inappropriate photos of them including an instance where an inappropriate video was shot as an outtakes video, rumored to be ordered by Snyder to be filmed himself. And it's just been a complete shit show of an environment. And it's gotten worse over the years with, these reports coming out and an investigation being launched, but Snyder sort of having his hands all over it to sort of determine what goes out and what doesn't, to the point where Congress themselves had to get involved. And then within the past year or so, news coming out of him stealing money essentially from the NFL owners, which I'm shocked didn't get him canned initially when it came out, of him basically concealing money, concealing revenue that was supposed to be distributed out to the owners and to the players. And he was concealing money from them, which is stealing from them. He's stealing money that is not his. Shocked they didn't get him canned instantly, but it's just another chapter in the novel that is the Dan Snyder era in Washington. But luckily, that doesn't seem to be going to be a much longer story. Because here today, November 2nd, 2022, a statement was released by the Washington Commanders and Dan Snyder. I will find it 1 second. And I will read the statement to you. The statement reads, and I quote, Dan and Tanya Snyder of the Washington Commanders announced today that they have hired Bofa Securities to consider potential transactions. The Snyders remain committed to the team and all of its employees and its countless fans to putting the best product on the field and continuing the work to set the gold standard for workplaces in the NFL. Ain't that ironic? But the first paragraph of that statement is something I want to highlight. Potential transactions. And that has been reported, a little more clarity on that from Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, that this could potentially mean, when they say potential transactions, it basically translates to selling of the team. Now, we don't know if that means in its entirety. We don't know if that means partial sale and just distributing it out to part owners. We don't know that detail yet. We don't know those details yet. But per Rappaport, it is to be believed that it means wholesale of the Washington Commanders franchise. Which means, if that is true, the Snyder era is finally going to be coming to an end. Long overdue. Way, way long overdue. The fact that it just now happened, after everything that I just told you about, that has happened over the past few years, it is remarkable that he's been able to hold on as long as he has. But it's a move that needs to happen. Like I said, I'm shocked that the owners didn't already force him out. Jim Irsay has been very vocal about that for the past couple of weeks, how he's been very critical. Jim Irsay has been very, very critical of the league, of their handling of the Snyder situation and the investigation, and how Dan Snyder paints NFL owners in a certain light that Irsay himself says, I'm not like that. Don't lump me in the same group as him. I'm not like him. It feels great. I'm not even a Washington fan, but if you're just a football fan, period, just knowing the fact that Dan Snyder would have nothing to do with this league just makes everyone feel so much better, because he has been the one consistent eyesore for this league for years now. He has been the biggest thorn in this league's side for years because he's just walking controversy. Whether that is how he runs the team, whether that's how he runs the organization inside the building, what he does outside of the building, what he may or may not do. Oh, completely forgot about this. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. In one of those Washington Post articles, there were a few women who accused Snyder himself of sexual misconduct, including one instance back in 2009 where he offered to pay a woman $1.6 million in essentially hush money. That's really what it is. It says they paid her that because she accused him of sexual misconduct, and he paid her that to make her go away. But it basically makes it hush money. Is essentially what it is. So every sign for being a horrible person has been checked off for Dan Snyder. He can claim that all the other misconduct stuff he didn't know about, and he's done that. He's been on record saying he didn't know it was like that. He can say that all he wants, but at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head. And I find it very hard to believe that all of those instances with this same organization for that long of a period of time, because it wasn't just like in recent years, it was apparently throughout his entire 20-plus year reign as ownership of the Washington Commanders. So this has been a constant thing apparently throughout his tenure of this toxic masculinity environment and this toxic work environment, and it's spilled out in a way to the football team, not in a sense of like, oh, they're like toxic and they're not likable. There are a lot of players on this team now and throughout the years that have been extremely likable, man. The biggest one arguably the most popular player throughout Snyder's tenure was Sean Taylor. May he rest in peace. The late, great Sean Taylor, even though he was only on the team for 3.5 years before he unfortunately passed away back in 2007, he was easily and has been this team's biggest fan favorite and has been beloved by everyone, both when he was in the league or both when he was alive and even still to this day. And even now, you look at now, or even before that, London Fletcher was highly respected by everybody, both in the league and outside of the league. Even now, like Terry McLaurin, great player. I love him to death. Antonio Gibson, I really like him. Brian Robinson. Also, that was another report today that Congress is about to make a statement of make an arrest for who was involved in the Brian Robinson shooting. So that's good that someone's going to be brought to justice there. But you got him. You have Chase Young. You have all these. You have Ron Rivera as the head coach. I like Ron Rivera. You have all these players both currently on the team that I really, really like. But you almost feel like you can't root for them because it's the organizational stench created by the guy on top. It's the entirety of the thing. It's just that logo and that stadium and that team feels negative because of the environment we know is going on behind closed doors there. That's what we mean when we say we don't want to root for them because of the guy on top. But thankfully, it looks like it's going to be no more. And the sooner he gets out, the better. And, I saw somebody on Twitter who was a Panthers fan. He said, Washington fans, be careful what you wish for because it can get worse. I don't know how it can get worse than Dan Snyder, honestly. I have no clue. How someone could be possibly worse than Dan Snyder at this rate. He has in a way solidified his stance as not just the worst owner in NFL history, but one of the worst owners in sports history, potentially, with all the things that he and his organization has been accused of over the years. this was a matter of time, and it seems like it's going to be happening very, very soon. And that will be the biggest ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead moment that this league has had in a long, long time. So, if ever. So, Washington fans, celebrate. It's not official yet. It's not official. But it does look like it's heading in that direction, and it looks like it's going to be heading in that direction very, very soon. So that's something to be positive about. That really is something to be positive about, not just for Washington fans, but for football fans, period. Because I can't look at this league with him still in it. I can't bring myself to root or like the Washington Commanders with him still owning the team. I can't do it. But that seems like it's going to a positive place of him not being here anymore. And that was writing on the wall really since the news of him stealing from owners came out. Because Snyder has been on record saying that, it's NFL owners, it's like the mafia, we all sort of like have each other's backs in a way. That was what Snyder himself has said in the past. That doesn't look like it's going to be much of a brotherhood anymore, especially since that the news of him stealing money from them has come out. So, you heard what Irsay said, and that's just Jim Irsay. Who knows what other owners across the league think? It seems almost unanimous that they don't want anything to do with him anymore. And I feel like he's doing this the same way I think Snyder's going about the sale of this team, the same way he went about changing the name to the Washington football team a couple of years ago back in 2020. He's treating it the same way. He's being dragged into doing it, kicking and screaming. And guess what? We don't care. Kick and scream all you want. Kick and scream all you fucking want. Because nobody wants anything to do with you anymore. And it's going to be, once it's official, once that day finally comes, it's going to be the best day in NFL history, maybe. Because just from like a pure joy standpoint, a pure unanimous joy across all 32 teams, across all 32 fan bases. It's just going to be collective joy of, yes, he's finally gone. He's finally gone. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I just saw it this morning. It broke this morning, and I felt like it'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. But now let's get into the main event of the evening. The NFL trade deadline was yesterday. And like I said, I wanted to split this up into two segments on the podcast. Originally, do this and then talk about my not my weekly. Why do I keep saying weekly? My mid-season report cards. But like I said, so much happened just yesterday at the deadline in a way that was unprecedented that I decided to just can that idea entirely and move it to next week. And for the rest of this show, we're going to talk about all the significant moves from the trade deadline within the past week, as well as all the craziness that happened yesterday. So let's go straight into it. This whole trade-a-palooza really kicked off last Thursday, if I remember that correctly. Yes, it was last Thursday when the Carolina Panthers, who have waved the white flag on the season, presumably, because Steve Wilkes and PJ Walker have done really well so far these past couple of weeks. But they presumably waved the white flag on the season. They were like, Matt Rule thing didn't work. We're just going to reset the organization. We're going to trade the guys who deserve to be traded and deserve to go other places and try and win a ring there while they're still in their primes. And hopefully they win a ring while we as an organization reset. And the biggest guy on that list was Christian McCaffrey, their franchise player, their franchise running back. They drafted 8th overall back in, 2017, out of Stanford. And he has been the face of the Carolina Panthers really ever since Luke Kuechly retired and since Cam Newton left. He's been the face of that organization. And he has been electric when he's on the field. He's been incredible on the field. Well, that's the problem, though, with McCaffrey over the years is when he's on the field. He has dealt with tons of injury issues. In the past, he's really, it seems like these past couple of years, he would never go more than 3 games without dealing with something. So it felt like that McCaffrey, who was like an MVP caliber player back in 2019, that player wasn't gone, but he was not up to that level anymore. And the 49ers ended up making a huge trade for him. Let me pull up the trade details. It was... So San Francisco sent next year's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks. They didn't have a 1st round pick due to the Trey Lance trade. And a 5th round pick next year. So they traded all of that in exchange for McCaffrey. And when this trade initially happened, I was stunned because, first of all, Carolina said they were not giving up McCaffrey unless they got at least a 1st-round pick out of it. So the fact that they took that haul without a 1st-round pick is kind of surprising in that regard. But I was also shocked from San Francisco's point of view of why would you give up that much for a running back, first of all, and also a running back who has had significant injury issues over the past couple seasons. It seemed like, in a way, a big risk, high reward sort of thing, but McCaffrey hadn't shown anything that he is that same kind of player because of his injuries. But last week against the Rams really solidified that Christian McCaffrey, it made us all remember that McCaffrey, when he is healthy, is the best offensive weapon in football. He is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. He can do anything. He's effective as a runner. He's amazing as a receiver out of the backfield. And you saw that last week against the Rams. He was the first player since LaDainian Tomlinson to rush for a touchdown, have a touchdown reception, and throw a touchdown pass all in the same game. And, watching that game and watching him these first 2 games as a 49er, Christian McCaffrey and the Kyle Shanahan offense just makes sense. He seems like the kind of player that the Shanahan offense was designed for. Like, he seems like that kind of play. He seems like this offense was made for a player like Christian McCaffrey specifically. And, and they didn't even have Deebo Samuel last week, who was out with an injury. So this offense, when Deebo comes back healthy, and if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, and that's the key with him, if he stays healthy, with that defense, this team's going to be terrifying going into January. They're going to be unbelievable. And it's felt like McCaffrey has been that missing piece that this team has desperately needed to take them over the top. Because, we've seen them where they've gotten to the Super Bowl before, couldn't close it out. They got into the NFC Championship game a couple times, couldn't close it out. It feels like McCaffrey, if he could stay healthy, is that piece that can finally get them over the top. Because like I said, you can't defend all of them. When they're all healthy, you can't defend all of them. You got McCaffrey, who can do everything he can do. When Deebo's healthy, you can finally use Deebo as a true wide receiver. And while he's not the best contested catch guy, he's phenomenal run after the catch. I mean, you saw that when they used him out of the backfield a lot last year. And George Kittle, when he's healthy, is arguably the best tight end in football. So this offense, all of a sudden, Jimmy G or no Jimmy G, they're going to be scary because of all of that talent and how explosive all that talent is. I didn't even mention Brandon Ayuk. This team is loaded with offensive talent right now That mixed in with a defense as suffocating as that Niners defense is, if D'Amico Ryans isn't a head coach but within the next 2 years, I'll be stunned. But this team right now, if they can stay healthy, is going to be... They're going to give a lot of teams in the NFC and in the NFL, period, a run for their money come postseason time. But yeah, this move, and the moment was kind of head-scratching, but also made sense in a way, but now it completely makes sense. This looked like it was a home run hit for the 49ers. And also for the Panthers, they were able to get a pretty decent haul out of that as well. They got multiple picks in this upcoming draft, and they're in a rebuild year. They're going into a rebuild year. They could potentially get a quarterback, depending on how P.J. Walker plays the rest of the year. And it's in a way, this kind of set both teams up of like, all right, the Niners can compete this year, and the Panthers are set up decently where they can find a quarterback in this next year's draft and build from there. So I think this is a win-win for both teams. A win for the Niners now. I think it'll also be a win for the Panthers long term. But it didn't stop there, because a couple days later, the New York Jets traded for Jacksonville Jaguars running back James Robinson. And all the Jets had to give up was a 6th-round conditional pick, which could potentially turn into a 5th-round pick with some situations met. But the Jets making this move after the confirmation of their rookie running back, Breece Hall, tore his ACL in a game against the Packers on a hit that didn't look like it was a knee injury. Initially, I've talked about this, I think, last week or a couple weeks ago, where that injury looked like he got hit up high, and I thought it was a head injury, and then reports came out that it was actually his knee, and then MRIs confirmed it was a torn ACL, and he was going to miss the rest of his rookie year. And that was a huge blow for the Jets, because he was their home run hitter. He was their biggest explosive playmaker, and now he's out for the year, and they needed to find somebody to try and replace that. And Michael Carter is really good, but you don't really want him as your full-time back. He's really best as a secondary back or a second option. So they went out and traded for James Robinson, who wasn't being utilized at all in Jacksonville, not with the emergence of Travis Etienne and what he can do. And James Robinson is sort of similar in play style and build to Breece Hall. Similar size, similar play style, but he's not the home run hitter that Breece Hall is, and he doesn't have the speed that Breece Hall does. And Breece Hall isn't even that particularly fast. He has like deceptive speed. You know, James Robinson doesn't really have that deceptive speed to be a home run hitter the way Breece Hall's a home run hitter. But as far as for the Jets go, he's a good insurance plan for this year. He's definitely not going to be a long-term option here, obviously. But yeah, he's basically just here to be the Breece Hall replacement to try and fill that Breece Hall size void. That's not going to be able to be replaced because Breece Hall, even though he's only a rookie, has shown that he's going to be special in this league for a long, long time. And yeah, that's really all James Robinson is. He's just going to be here to fill a spot to try and get him that similar kind of production, just without the home run hitting ability. That's really all on that. And then we got a couple trades a day or two before November 1st. And that was, first was Robert Quinn, defensive end for the Chicago Bears, formerly, now got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. And he got traded to the Eagles in exchange for a 4th-round pick next year. And when I saw this news, my first thought was, every other GM in the NFL, Howie Roseman. That was the first thing I thought of. Whatever you think your GM is, he pales in comparison to the ability of Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman is in a tier all by himself. This man, nobody can build a roster in the NFL better than Howie Roseman. He's been incredible. And I've said in the past where like Howie Roseman has like a love-hate relationship with the city of Philadelphia, it feels like at times. You know, not drafting Justin Jefferson, not drafting DK Metcalf, you know, drafting the likes of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Jalen Reagor instead of those guys. But man, his roster building and trying his best and setting this team up for legit success has been unbelievable. I've talked about like trading for A.J. Brown during the draft this past year, shedding the likes of Jalen Reagor and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and actually getting some draft picks out of those guys in return, trading for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at the start of the season, picking up James Bradbury, cutting Fletcher Cox to clear up cap space only to bring him back on a cheaper deal. And now the addition of Robert Quinn, and oh my gosh, this has been amazing. Like he is the master class. He is the gold standard of what an NFL GM is supposed to be right now. And he is loading this team up with now more talent on a team that's still the only undefeated team left in the NFL right now. They're currently, 7-0, 6-0? They're currently 7-0 at the moment. And this, I think they're 7-0, or 6-0 or 7-0. Let me look up. I don't put much stock in a lot of records at times. But they are currently, they're undefeated. Yep, they're currently 7-0. They are currently 7-0, and they just added some more talent. And it's amazing, man. It's absolutely amazing. And not only that, not only did he set this team up for success on paper, but the coaching staff is actually utilizing these pieces to their advantage. You know, Jalen Hurts his development has been incredible. You know, A.J. Brown, I mean, my God, his game against Pittsburgh, Jesus, that was an MVP performance in one day. That was unbelievable. He had 3 touchdowns on 6 catches, 150 plus yards receiving in that game against Pittsburgh last week. He has been every bit as advertised and then some. You know, they have not one, but 2 shutdown corners right now, and Darius Slay and James Bradbury, who I brought up. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's been really good for them. Devonta Smith has improved from his rookie year. And Robert Quinn was even able to make a little bit of noise on Sunday. And this team is looking like the team to beat in the NFC right now. In an NFC, we came into this season thinking, all right, it's probably going to be the Rams and Tampa, and that's really it. No, it's the Eagles who have been the premier team in the NFC right now. And not just because of their record. They're 7-0. We've seen teams that have been undefeated late in the year, but you look at them and you're like, this doesn't look like a great team. I mean, the 2020 Steelers come to mind where, yeah, they were 11-0 to start the year, but you look at that team, you're like, it's not a good football team. Not this Eagles team, man. They're 7-0, and they look like the best team in the NFC. They're 7-0, they're undefeated, and they play like they're undefeated. So they are absolutely incredible, and Howie Roseman deserves a ton of credit for this because he has absolutely set this roster up for success, and the coaching staff and the players are getting the most out of all of that effort. So, yeah, man, this has been incredible to watch. I can't wait to see how this goes moving forward. And then later that day, actually, no, it was a day or so later, where you had the New York Giants trading wide receiver Kadarius Toney to the Kansas City Chiefs in exchange for a 3rd and a 6th round pick next year. And Kadarius Toney is a storyline that has gone on since the offseason, where Toney didn't show up and he didn't want to be there, is essentially what it is. Even though they had spent a 1st round pick on him in 2021, had a rookie year, and then just for some reason didn't show up to OTAs and just was like, I don't want to be here, trade me. He saw all the things going around in the NFL with receivers in the offseason, and he was like, I don't want to be here. I want out. The problem is the guys that were asking for trades were the likes of Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill. Kadarius Toney, you're a good player, but you're nowhere near the level of those guys. And the Giants were like, no, we're not trading him. And Toney eventually showed up, but they didn't play him that much. And finally, the Giants caved in, and they traded him to the one spot that I think Kadarius Toney is going to thrive in, and that's Kansas City. Because you look at him, you look at his skill set as a player, that sort of like gadget player, that's what they kind of used him at Florida, was that gadget slot receiver type. I think Kansas City is going to find some really creative ways to use him in a receiving core that is good, but not as scary as it's been in years past, because you don't have that Tyreek Hill level player. Now, Kadarius Toney's not going to be Tyreek Hill. I don't think he'll ever be the player Tyreek Hill is, but he has the speed and the gadget ability for them to really use some things with him. And it's sort of the same way they were using McCole Hardman when Tyreek Hill was there. So expect Kadarius Toney going forward to sort of be in that similar role. And now all of a sudden that receiving core for the Chiefs looks a little more intimidating in a way, because you got Juju on the outside, you got Sky Moore as your slot guy, you got MVS as your deep threat, and now you have Kadarius Toney in the mix as sort of your like Curtis Samuel type of player. So that's going to be really interesting moving forward, how they utilize all those pieces, and it's starting to come together a little more. And it's going to help when you still have Travis Kelce out there, who is the best tight end in football right now. So I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's a little fun little thing that the Chiefs just got to help their chances moving forward. And then another big one. One of the things we saw after the Robert Quinn trade to Philadelphia was the video of Roquan Smith at a press conference breaking down, crying a little bit when he was talking about Robert Quinn not being in Chicago anymore and what that means. And it was in videos like that where you kind of see the toll that the business side of the NFL has on some players and the emotional impact that can leave. Because when you're playing a game like this, it's hard to remember sometimes that it is still a business at the end of the day. Well, Roquan Smith, who had been in trade talks throughout the offseason, throughout training camp, and even into the season, he said, hey, trade me. I don't want to be here anymore. And he eventually showed up and played because he said, I still have a contract to go by and I'm still going to play that, but I still don't want to be here because his team doesn't seem to value me. And he eventually got his wish, because a day before the trade deadline, on Monday, Roquan Smith was traded to the Baltimore Ravens in exchange for, hold on one second. Yeah. Roquan was traded to the Ravens in exchange for a 2nd and 5th round pick next year and linebacker AJ Klein, excuse me. And we need to talk about this because as for Chicago, you are getting rid of a big player who's sort of been a fan favorite there for a while. And he's one of those few, play, because like the hardest position to play in the NFL right now is linebacker, especially when you're dealing with these like raw traitsy guys. And the game is just so much faster now, and the linebacker position has sort of been devalued in a way because of the way the NFL is right now, because a lot of linebackers traditionally can't keep up with these fast-paced, high-flying offenses like this now. And so it's very hard to find linebackers who are consistently great in today's NFL. Roquan Smith has turned into one of those players, and he's one of those rare first-round linebackers who has actually shown that he can play at a high level in this league as a high draft pick. So to get rid of a guy like that when they're so hard to come across is very difficult to do. But it's something that's been a writing on the wall for a while, and it was either that or they were just going to let him walk in the offseason and get nothing in return. So at least they were able to get something out of him. As for Baltimore, we've seen the past couple of weeks they're starting to right the ship a little bit after having some serious consistency issues as far as keeping leads and all that stuff, especially defensively. Defensively, they've not looked good the first half of the year, and they've started to get things back in order a little bit, and this, I think, is going to solidify it even more. Roquan has been, like I said, he's been an amazing player in this league, and I think he's going to a place that suits him best. I don't know, Roquan in Baltimore just makes all the sense of the world to me, and he's going to make that defense instantly better just by his presence alone. So I think that's going to be a huge addition for Baltimore moving forward, not just this season, but it's seasons to come, because I do think Baltimore is willing to pay him, though paying a linebacker is very controversial to do, especially in today's NFL, similar to the running back position, why everyone says like you don't pay for a running back. But yeah, I think Roquan's one of those players that definitely deserves that contract that Baltimore is definitely going to give him by season's end. So that'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward. And then we get to November 1st, Tuesday, November 1st. The day of the NFL trade deadline, and this was where all of the shit just decided to happen. In all my years as a football fan, I've never seen the trade deadline day this busy. And it started off with early in the morning in a rare interdivision trade. The Minnesota Vikings, in a trade with the Detroit Lions, the Vikings traded their second and third round pick in next year's draft, the 2023 draft, in exchange for next year's fourth round pick, a 2024 conditional fourth, and tight end TJ Hockenson. And this, to me, came out of absolute nowhere, because I did not know that TJ Hockenson was even going to be available, let alone the Lions actually willing to trade him. So, as far as for Detroit goes, I don't really entirely understand it. I don't know if this is a sign that they feel like their season's done. I don't really know, because their offense has really been one of the only good things about this team this year, and they would have had a much, much better record had they just had a defense. Forget a better defense, just had a defense, period. But yeah, this from Detroit's standpoint, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, because TJ Hockenson, because they've been dealing with injuries on the offensive side of the ball a lot, and TJ Hockenson's been the only guy consistently that's been there for them and reliable for them. So to just give him away to a division rival, no less, is kind of surprising. I guess that's Detroit's way of thanking Minnesota for allowing them to trade with them back in the draft to go up and get Jameson Williams. Maybe that's another thing of maybe Detroit was willing to get rid of TJ Hockenson because they know Jameson Williams is going to be there on the horizon. We don't know what was going through Detroit's head when they made that move. But as far as for Minnesota goes, they're 6-1 at the moment. And this was a really good acquisition for them in my eyes. Because Irv Smith, they just placed him on IR. He's going to be out for, I think, 8 to 10 weeks. And even when he was playing, he has not been the kind of tight end that they were hoping to get when they drafted him out of Alabama. Not even close. He's been meh at times, but not what they want out of that position. And I think TJ Hockenson is going to give that to them because I do think he has he has sneaky speed. He's a really good contested catch guy, a really good run blocker, kind of similar to like a Hunter Henry in a way, but he's better than Hunter. I think he's like a Hunter Henry, but just better after the catch. So he is going to be a really interesting piece in them, in that offense. And I think Kevin O'Connell is going to have a lot of fun with how they're going to use him, just in blocking schemes as well as mismatch problems. So he's going to be really interesting to watch in that offense. I'm excited to see what they use him for going forward. And then not too long after that, actually I'll save this for the end, for the grand finale. But another trade they have that day was William Jackson of the Washington Commanders. He was a big free agent pickup for them a couple of years ago. And they picked him up. Washington traded him to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He sent my brain. Washington sent Jackson a conditional 7th round pick in 2025 to Pittsburgh in exchange for a 2025 conditional 6th. So essentially nothing. Washington essentially sent him to Pittsburgh for nothing. Now, this was something that was on the horizon for them. They were going to cut William Jackson at the end of if they weren't able to get a trade done for him. So he was not going to be on that team past November 1st regardless. But Pittsburgh was able to get something for him. And, I think William Jackson on a defense that is kind of needy at corner right now. They kind of got a thin corner room right now, and they needed somebody who is good in a man-to-man situation. And William Jackson, I think, big body corner, played really well for Cincinnati, which got him that big contract in Washington to begin with, because he is a really big physical man-to-man corner. And I think him going to Pittsburgh is going to help solidify the back end just a little bit more. Now, he's not a superstar in any way, shape, or form. Like, he's not going to be that difference maker that Minkah Fitzpatrick was when they traded for him. But I think he is going to be a really good player for them. He's easily going to be this team's number one corner. And I think it's going to make a bigger difference once TJ Watt does come back from injury, which I believe is going to be this week. So we will see how this goes moving forward. Now, do I think it's going to make a difference as far as saving their season goes? No, because they made another trade, and like I said, that was the one I'll talk about at the end. But yeah, I think that's a solid move all around for a team that was kind of thin at the corner spot. And next up, another big one was Bradley Chubb. And there were talks before the Broncos played the Jaguars in London that that game was going to determine who was going to be on this team moving forward. And we thought Bradley Chubb was one of those names. And they thought after they won that Bradley Chubb was kind of going to be off the market. We were wrong. He was still on the market, and the Miami Dolphins took full advantage of it because the Dolphins traded a first-round pick next year, a fourth-round pick in 2024, and running back Chase Edmonds to the Denver Broncos in exchange for Chubb and a 2025 fifth-round pick. So let's talk about this from Miami's perspective first, as far as Bradley Chubb. So Miami, they had gotten 3 first-round picks when San Francisco traded up to number 3 back in 2021 to take Trey Lance. Miami got 3 first-round picks in that trade. They have since got rid of all 3 of them. They have traded that first-round pick to trade up and get Jalen Waddle in that same draft. They traded that second first-round pick to get Tyreek Hill, and they traded the last first-round pick, this one, to get Bradley Chubb. So all 3 of those picks they got in the Trey Lance trade are gone. Now, as far as for Bradley Chubb, I don't think he's going to be like this insane difference maker because he's not the player, like he's not the game wrecker we all thought he could be coming out of NC State. But he is still a really damn good pass rusher. And, they've had the same defense that they had under Brian Flores. And that was the one thing we were all concerned about when Mike McDaniel was hired, was are they going to keep the same defensive coaching staff, because that defense was really good for them, and they did, and that defense has still been pretty good for them. And I think Bradley Chubb just made it better, because there's no such thing as too much pass rush. And Jalen Phillips, I think, is going to benefit the most out of this, because they've kind of been relying on Jalen Phillips to try and be the team's number 1 pass rusher outside of Melvin Ingram. And he's not at that point yet. He's still raw. He's still in development right now, and he doesn't have what it takes at this point in time to be this team's number 1 or number 2 edge rusher. Now, if you put him in a situation where he's the number 3 edge rusher, now all of a sudden you don't have to worry about him being exposed that much, and you can focus on developing him while Melvin Ingram and Bradley Chubb do all the dirty work. So I think they just strengthened their pass rush on a defense that was already pretty good as it was. And I think they're going to benefit huge for it. They're all in. The Miami Dolphins are all in. They showed that this offseason, and they showed it here again, that they are all in this year. Probably not going to win a Super Bowl this year, but they're definitely going to try and make noise this year and for at least another couple more years. So that's for Miami. But for Denver, I also really like this trade for Denver as well. First of all, they got a really good running back out of it, Chase Edmonds, and they needed somebody on the ground because they're in a bind right now as far as the run game goes. Latavius Murray has played well when he's gotten carries for them. Melvin Ingram, I'm still not entirely sure what's up with him. And Mike Boone is, well, Mike Boone. He's getting more reps than, frankly, he should. So getting a guy like Chase Edmonds, who's a really good third down back, to take those reps away from Mike Boone is going to be really beneficial to them, I think. And also, they got another first-round pick out of it, and they didn't have a first-round pick this year because that was in the Russell Wilson trade. So they will at least get a first-round pick this year, which is big for them because this season was looking lost up until that win against Jacksonville. Now, I'm not going to say it saved their season, but at least kept them afloat. We'll see how it goes moving forward. But as far as this trade goes, I like it for both teams. I think it's good for Miami, who's trying to compete right now. And I think it's also good for Denver for trying to make up for lost capital from a trade that looked like it was going to be a disaster initially. Another one that was very interesting, and this was a trade that happened at the last minute. Nyheim Hines, Colts running back Nyheim Hines, traded to the Buffalo Bills in exchange for Zach Moss and a 2024 conditional 6th-round pick. Now, Zach Moss wasn't getting the carries because they were getting taken from Devin Singletary and James Cook. But Nyheim Hines is interesting because he's been a really good backup running back for Indianapolis. And he's basically going to come out and be this team's 3rd down back, while James Cook, who has not looked as they had hoped in his rookie year up to this point, they're probably going to bring him in, sit James Cook on the bench for a little bit, develop him a little more, and let Nyheim Hines, probably at least for this year, just do what he's been doing in Indy, which has been a reliable 3rd down receiving back and be a playmaker out of the backfield that, to be frank, this team doesn't really have. Now, Nyheim Hines is not like this explosive playmaker, but he's a better playmaker out of the backfield than anything they've had over the past few years. And I've said it multiple times in the past. I've said it again. This Bills offense, as scary as it is, but if they develop a ground game or develop some kind of game out of the backfield, this team's going to be terrifying and at times damn near impossible to stop. So I think Nyheim Hines made an already great offense even better in my eyes, because I think he's actually going to be a much bigger part of this offense than I think some people will realize. And just the thought of Nyheim Hines in the receiving game in this offense is just, it's so fun to look at. So that's going to be, like I said, the Bills are all in. They won a Super Bowl this year, and they think Nyheim Hines is going to be that piece for them. And we'll see, but just the thought of Nyheim Hines in this offense is really fun to think about. 2 more huge trades that happen that I want to talk about. One of which they'll have an impact this year. Another will not have an impact till next year, but it's still huge nonetheless. The one that'll have an impact next year is the Atlanta Falcons trading Calvin Ridley to the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for a 2023 5th-round conditional pick and a 2024 4th-round conditional pick. So Calvin Ridley, who, as we noted, has been suspended for the entirety of this year because of a gambling issue, he will not be on the field this year, but he will be on the field next year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And what a move for Jacksonville. Like, Atlanta, they got a couple picks out of this. But for Jacksonville, what a move for them. This is, to me, the ultimate low-risk, high-reward move for them. Because if it doesn't work out, you didn't give up that much, and he's still on his rookie deal. So there's that. But if it hits, it's Calvin Ridley, and if he hits, he's usually going to hit pretty big. And what has been the mission for the Jaguars up to this point is developing Trevor Lawrence, making sure Trevor Lawrence has what he needs in order to succeed. And they did that a little bit in the offseason, getting Christian Kirk, keeping Marvin Jones there, getting Zay Jones, getting him some kind of weapons to work with a little bit. And that's really been this team's mission since they drafted him, or really just since this past offseason, because I don't really know what Urban Meyer's mission was. But yeah, that's basically been this team's focus, is trying to make sure Trevor Lawrence has what he needs to succeed, and he has the weapons he needs to succeed. Well, you know what? You know how you make sure that he has what he needs to succeed? You get him Calvin frickin' Ridley. So, like I said, he's not going to be on the field this year, obviously, but next year, when he has a full training camp to work with Trevor Lawrence and a full season next year, like I said, man, if he hits, it's going to hit pretty big, man. And the thought of a Trevor Lawrence to Calvin Ridley connection next year is going to be fun as hell to watch, and I am all here for it. So what a great move by Jacksonville in that regard. Like I said, low risk, high reward, because if he doesn't hit, he's still in his rookie deal, and you only gave up a couple conditional picks. So, yeah, I think this was the ultimate low risk, high reward move for them, and this is going to be so fun to watch for next year. And then the last trade I want to talk about is a trade that happened earlier in the day. This is the one I wanted to save to the end because there's a couple things that came out of this trade that I want to talk about. And that is, of course, Chase Claypool, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers, traded to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a second-round pick in next year's draft. So first I'm going to talk about Chicago and what this means for them, because I was stunned that Chicago was thinking of buying somebody at the deadline because they looked like complete sellers, selling Robert Quinn, selling Roquan Smith. So when I saw that they were trading for Chase Claypool, I was completely stunned by it. But the more I thought about it, the more it actually kind of makes sense. First of all, Claypool still has another year left in his rookie contract. He was a second-round pick, so he doesn't have that fifth year of contractual obligation. But he still has one more year left in his rookie deal. And he's going to a team where he's basically going to be at least this team's number 2 receiver right off the rip with him and Darnell Mooney, which is a pretty good young receiver tandem for the most part. And also, you're getting Justin Fields, who has been playing significantly better over these last 3 weeks, and looks like he's finally starting to settle into the NFL and the speed in the NFL. And you get him somebody who he can work with and can be, when he wants to be, an explosive playmaker. Because people forget, back in 2020, rookie Chase Claypool was fun to watch, man. He was actually one of my favorite receivers in that season, Chase Claypool was, because he was so big. He's like, what is he, like 6'4", 238 pounds, and really fast, with a huge body, really good contested catch guy out of Notre Dame, and he looked like a star in the making. And then since then, he's sort of kind of teetered out a little bit. He has not returned back to that rookie form. But here he is back in a situation with a young quarterback similar to him, developing similar to him, and he's an explosive playmaker in his own right. Now, Claypool, the one thing I've ripped on Claypool the past couple of years is, despite having that big body that I just described, isn't as physical as you would like him to be. He doesn't use his body a lot of times in those contested catch situations, and a lot of times it seems like he's actually kind of scared of contact. Now, if you can coach that out of him, because I think Matt Eberflus is the kind of guy that I think Matt Eberflus will be able to coach that out of him, hopefully at least, for his sake. But you get him in the room with Justin Fields, try and develop some chemistry with him. And like I said, if it hits, all of a sudden, the Bears' future is looking much, much brighter than it was just a month ago when Justin Fields wasn't playing that well and the Bears were in the running for the worst team in football. Now, all of a sudden, this team actually has a semblance of hope out of nowhere. And this is going to be a lot of fun. Not just for this season, but what this could be for next year. Because like I said, he's still under contract for one more year next year. So this is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to see how Claypool does in Chicago and how he develops with Justin Fields. And if he doesn't work out, then they let him go for nothing. Though I will say I'm not going to say low risk, high reward, because they did give up a second round pick, which is probably going to be a pretty high pick this year. But that's for Chicago. And the last thing I want to talk about in regards to this trade, and it'll be the last thing I talk about in this show, is that the team I want to talk about in this trade is a team that was not involved in this trade. As a matter of fact, it was a team that wasn't involved at all during the trade deadline. What are the Green Bay Packers doing? The Green Bay Packers, everyone and their mother knew that this team desperately needs receiver help. They desperately needed to make a move for a receiver at the deadline. Desperately. And because you can't keep going out every single week with Amari Rodgers and Samori Toure and a arm-slinged Alan Lazard and Sammy Watkins, who has a half a hamstring and can't run to save his life. You can't go out with that same kind of receiving core every single week. So everyone was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. They have to make a move at the deadline. And they were apparently in talks with Pittsburgh for Chase Claypool. Apparently they were in talks on them for the past 3 weeks. And they said, oh, we tried, but we just couldn't get a deal done. And the Bears came in the last minute and offered him something better. The Steelers have made it publicly known for weeks now that the price for Chase Claypool was a second-round pick. It has been known publicly for weeks now. You're telling me you've been in talks with them for 3 weeks, knowing that that was the price, and you're telling me that the Bears outbid you? How? Don't you think if the Steelers knew you were offering a second-round pick that they would have taken it? That doesn't make sense to me. Because it confirms to me that the Packers didn't want to, that Brian Gutekunst, the GM of the Packers, didn't want to offer a second-round pick. He thought Claypool wasn't worth a second-round pick. Now, I don't even know what else to say in this more because there was a video from that franchise guy who was also a diehard Packers fan. And he did an entire rant about this on a live stream during the deadline about the Green Bay Packers. So if you haven't checked that out, go check that out at youtube.com/thatfranchiseguy to go check that out. He also makes some great content over there. But this Packers team is just it's just so bizarre to see an issue staring them right in the face and just choosing to ignore it. It doesn't make sense. You legitimately looked at your receiving core, and here's the damnedest thing. Odell Beckham Jr. and Will Fuller are still free agents. They don't have teams. They're still free agents. Odell, we don't know what he's thinking. But Will Fuller is sitting at home, guys. You can pick up Will Fuller instantly. You don't even have to do it. He's a free agent. Just sign him. Bring him in the building and sign him. And they don't even want to do that. And it wasn't even Claypool. Brandon Cooks, who was he walked out of the building in Houston expecting to be traded, because that's the thing with Brandon Cooks. This man's been on 4 different teams and has never been a free agent once. He's always been traded throughout his career. He's like a blunt that gets passed around from person to person. He was expecting to get traded. And the Packers didn't even think about it. They didn't even think about trading for Brandon Cooks, even though he would have instantly been this team's number 1 the second he got into the building. Will Fuller would have been this team's number 1 the second he goes into that building. Chase Claypool would have been this team's number 1 the second he went into that building. It's just old school thinking of, let's just focus on defense. focus on running backs, and then we'll just go from there. It's a different league now. Receiver, if you don't have good receivers, you're not going to fucking thrive in this league, man. You're not gonna. Like I said, you can't look at this receiving core with Christian Watson, Alan Lazard, Sammy Watkins, Amari Rogers, Samari Torre, and think that this is a good enough crew for Aaron Rodgers to work with to get you into the playoffs. It's not going to happen. And if the plan was to just rebuild, which is what it looks like from the outside looking in, that this team just wants to rebuild, then why the hell did you re-sign Aaron Rodgers? When you could have, forget a king's ransom, you could have gotten the fucking castle for Aaron Rodgers if you had just traded him a year ago. If you were going to rebuild anyway, why did you bring him back? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I've said this before. I get it. I sound like a broken record because I've talked about this team so much before and how frustrating it is, and just their refusal to just ignore the wide receiver position entirely. And I feel like everything that has been said, whether on YouTube or on Twitter, and that was another thing, watching Packers Twitter yesterday just go ape shit because their team was just, because Brian Kunikous was just sitting at his desk with his thumb up his ass and his other thumb in his mouth and just in a fucking fetal position or just fucking rocking back and forth in his chair while everyone else was actually doing shit. It doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't make a lick of goddamn sense whatsoever. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be the end of this episode of the Double Diesel Sports Podcast. Like I said, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Also, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And again, if you haven't already, please go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. With that being said, I am Double Diesel.